Hey, it's Rabanzo here. As a gigging musician and fan of live music, I love sharing my personal experience and the things I'm learning from other music artists and professionals. You can be privy to those learnings by joining the Unstarving Musician community. In the process, you will be supporting me and this podcast. Just go to unstarvingmusician.com to join. You'll get an email from me, usually every 7 to 10 days, with tips, insights, secrets, all intended to help make your music journey a little better and brighter. All right, let's do this. This is the Unstarving Musicians Podcast. The podcast features conversations with musicians and music industry professionals, all intended to help musicians be better at marketing, business, the creative process, and all the other things that empower us to do more of what we love. Make music. My guest in this episode is Eli Lev, and I forgot to ask him if that's his real name, but I sure do like the way it sounds. He and I connected many weeks ago on Twitter and reconnected on Twitter. I got around to listening to his work and thought I should have him on the podcast, and he was kind enough to come on, and apparently he's been a fan of the podcast since I told him about it, which is really nice. What a great guy. We recorded on Labor Day 2018, and what a fun conversation it was. He is genrefied in the neo-folk category. I think I've heard that one before. It sounds really cool, like his name. He performs solo and with a 5 to 6 piece band, which seems to be growing, he says. He is working on a 4-album project inspired by Navajo Nation's 4 cardinal directions. This was a fun part of our conversation. We also talk about Patreon, about his Patreon page, and about his launch process. He provided some really great tips. We talk a little bit about his YouTube channel, which has been very good for growth of his own community, Spotify playlisting, and his own personal social experiment on Spotify, which has worked out really well. You definitely want to hear that. He shares the journey of building his own little team to help him get his music out to the world. He is a recent addition to the indie music family. He's been going at it full-time for just a couple of years now. He's well-traveled. I forgot to ask him how old he is, but I suspect that all that travel has made him the cool guy that he is. You are going to hear his latest single, Chasing Daylight, at the end of this episode, and it is a good one. All right, enough of that. Here is me and Eli Lev. Eli, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I was looking over our message history on Twitter, and thank you, by the way, for the kind words you had mentioned probably back in April about the podcast. And I'm glad I went back and took a look at your work. I think I'd done so a couple of times, but you were doing some really great stuff, so it's definitely a pleasure to have you on the show.
Sure. Thanks. No, I connected with your podcast just at the right time. When I became a full-time musician. So it's been very helpful and very much appreciated. And it's cool that you invited me on because that means I'm doing something right. So that's good.
Well, man, it means a lot to me that you're finding it useful, the podcast. So are you in Washington, D.C. today, did you say?
Yes. Today I'm in Silver Spring, Maryland, just outside of D.C.
Okay. Is that by chance the area where you grew up?
It is. Yeah, right where I grew up. Cool. Grew up in Colesville, Maryland, and went to school around here, then went around the world a few times and came back just last year. So it's been a nice little homecoming. So.
Oh, cool. And did you spent most of your life there then after kind of growing up and into adulthood and then kind of did all the travel recently?
Well, I grew up, in the area, went to college in Indiana University in Bloomington. Okay. Then taught out in Arizona, traveled to Australia, New Zealand, Middle East, ended up in Tel Aviv, Israel, then a small country called Andorra in Europe. Have you ever heard of that one?
Yes, but I don't know anything about it. And I think when I was looking over my notes for our conversation, I saw it listed there. But yeah, tell me about it. What was that like?
Yeah, no, I had no idea it even existed either before I arrived there. So I was just doing some teaching out there. It's between Spain and France in the Pyrenees Mountains.
Cool.
About 60, 70,000 people live there. A very interesting place. And that was my last kind of international stop before coming back to the States a few years ago. So,
what kind of teaching did you do?
I did kind of the, the private English teacher kind of thing overseas, but I was an 8th grade language arts teacher here in the U.S. in Arizona for 3 years before I did that. So
okay, very cool. And I understand that you come from a musical family. Did your parents play professionally at all, or were they kind of just more casual with music?
I think my dad was more going towards that professional kind of route with the oboe. He was part of some orchestras. And my mom has kind of, she's like a singer, songwriter, plays guitar and piano, and did a lot of choral stuff. So they've both been involved in the music thing and passed that on to me, which I'm very grateful for. So, it's been musical family, you could say.
And what kind of music were they into in terms of the styles that they did?
I was raised on, all the good folk stuff, Dylan, Joplin, even like the old folky stuff, like Peter, Paul and Mary and, Pete Seeger, all that was kind of on constant rotation in the house, which is good. Simon and Garfunkel. So that was a nice kind of base to start with. Yeah. My dad also listened to those kind of genres. So it was good. It was a good way to start and have those melodies enter your consciousness. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At an early age.
Yeah. It sounds like a good soundtrack. Did you study music in college at all?
You could say that. I took music theory my freshman year and got a C-. So
That's not funny, I'm sorry.
No, it's hilarious. I can't believe I even got that high of a grade. I think she took pity on me. I should have failed it. So that was my brief stint in music theory. And then I also took classes in rock history. So the history of rock and roll classes were very big in Indiana University, taught by Glenn Gass. He's like a world-renowned rock historian. And those were a lot of fun. And I was thinking about getting a music minor by just taking rock history classes, but then I thought I second guessed that. So I haven't really formally learned music at any time.
Well, it doesn't show when you're listening to your recordings. They sound great, and I know you. It looks like it appears that you surround yourself with a good cast of players too. But also, I think the fact that you are multi-instrumental kind of lends itself to giving the impression that you might have some in-depth music education. Which since I mentioned it, how did you get to playing is it the native flute, the wind instrument that is included in your arsenal?
The native flute, right. So, along the way, I just keep picking up instruments, and it's like, oh, he can play harmonica and flute and guitar and he can sing. He must be like classically trained. But no, I just am picking up objects, you know what I mean? And making sounds out of them. So the native flute was one of those beautiful instruments, and just really connected to it. And have been trying to incorporate that into my music more. And that song Treason. My song Treason has the native flute on it, which is really cool. It makes people's ears kind of perk up. You know what I mean? They're like, "What the heck is that?" And it's like, well, this is a native instrument to the Americas, you could say, and many other indigenous cultures around the world. So we all have that ancient memory somewhere in our DNA, you know what I mean, of those sounds. So it's nice to incorporate those as well.
Yeah, and it's a cool looking instrument, particularly when someone like yourself, who's I'm sure either playing acoustic or mandolin or whatever other guitar like instrument that you're playing, and then people see you using that. Now, do you use that instrument often at live shows?
I do. I actually have my spare one right here. So yeah, that's my second one.
Nice. I think that's only the second ever live performance here on the podcast. So thank
you. I snuck it in there.
Very good. I like it.
Yeah. So I've got two of those. One is from High Spirits flute that I got in Santa Fe by Odo Borg. It's amazing. Odo Borg plays them, and it's an amazing flute. The other one I just picked up on one of those roadside kind of craft stands out on the Navajo Nation in Arizona. And that's, I don't play that one in shows, this one that I have now, but it's still really, really close to my heart. It was my first native flute. So yeah, they all have stories.
Very cool. I did gather, and you mentioned it now, I do this weekly, I think. I don't remember if it was pre or post pushing the record button, so to speak, but that you have been playing full-time as of somewhat recently, like in the past couple of years. Can you talk a little bit about how music and your performing or recording was prior to making the decision to be full-time, and then also touch on the story that surrounds your decision to be full-time?
Sure. Yeah. It's I'll try and make that as brief and to the point as possible, because it's quite the journey. But I think maybe some of us just start growing up around music and just kind of take a liking to it. You know what I mean? Oh, I'd like to maybe learn the guitar or maybe learn that. And my parents made me play piano like most kids, and I hated it like, all kids. But that kind of like, put a little bit of melody in me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, just, through middle school, I would do like a talent show. My first song was, My White Underwear, that I sang at my 7th grade talent show. That was a huge hit. I think that was the peak of my musical career, actually. But then from then, I was in a high school band just with some buddies, and, we made a 4-track album and played some shows. So that like got me used to that. And then, in college, just did some jamming with like, the local hippies and, have like the drum circles and all that good stuff, but nothing really, serious, just writing songs and playing around the whole way. And in Andorra, I was in a cover band, like the English tourists that were coming over to like do snowboarding and skiing. So that was fun and got a little more chops that way. And then, this whole time I'm just like kind of writing songs and silly songs and, playing them for people. They like them. It's fun. Nothing like serious. And then I finished my master's degree in Indiana University on language education. So I thought I was going to be a teacher trainer. Actually, I was going to be training teachers abroad. But then just had some downtime, went on a bike trip in southern Spain, came back to Washington, D.C., and started playing shows. And it really just kind of took off from there. One show led to the next, which led to the next, which led to me meeting this great percussionist, Alberto Parra, who used to be in this band called Louie and the Lovers on the West Coast, this like a Chicano classic rock band. They were amazing. So we just connected and started doing shows around here. Then everything just kind of all the pieces just kind of kept falling into place. Kept doing more music around the area until last November. I started the LLC, the Eli Lev Music LLC. Mm-hmm. And I guess that was kind of like the official point, where it really started. So yeah, it's been kind of a whirlwind.
Was there a moment where you said, I'm sure there was. What was the moment that when you just said, I'm going to do this?
There was a magical, spiritual, like universal moment, which is funny because it happened before I came back to the DC. My second year in my master's program at Indiana, I went on a solo vacation to Mexico, Puerto Vallarta. You ever been over there, the West Coast?
It's been a long time, but yes.
Yeah, so there's a town just maybe 45 minutes north of Puerto Vallarta called Sayulita. Mm-hmm. And, it's like got like this kind of surfer vibe, and, there's people from everywhere that go there. And maybe 15 miles north of Sayulita, not 15 miles north, maybe like 2 miles north, is a small beach called Playa Malpaso between Sayulita and San Pancho. I guess it means like bad pass or something, bad beach. But no one was there. There was no anything there. And I picked it out on a Google Maps from Bloomington, Indiana. And I was like, I'm just going to go to this beach and hang out for like a week or 2 weeks on my own this winter break. And I did. And I brought my travel guitar and I brought some songs of mine and I started playing out there. And, probably halfway into the trip, I just set the intention. I was like, you know what? You only live once. I can go back to teaching pretty much whenever. I love it. It's great. But I kind of want to see what would happen if I did the music thing. full time. So I set the intention, and then I kind of forgot about it. 6 months or then a year. And then, the universe kind of like got its wheels in order and started like, reconfiguring things. And then sure enough, after a year and a half, like things started catching up, and things started happening. So from that moment, even though it happened much, much, much later, I think maybe like me setting that intention had something to do with where I currently am at this moment. So, yeah.
Interesting. And so in setting the intention, is that a practice by chance or just some words that happen to come out? It sounds like maybe it has been a life practice, maybe not your entire life, but maybe something that you do when you decide, hey, it's I've got something on my mind or in my heart, and I'm going to set the intention.
Yeah, I mean, I am one that goes with the flow on one sense, but I think setting an intention and making a promise to yourself and committing to something is almost more powerful than any small item on the to-do list that you can check off. Sure. Do you see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it's like, making that commitment to yourself, I feel like is much more important than, who you book with or your social media or if your website is right. You know what I mean? That initial seed or that thought, if it's strong enough, can carry all those things forward. I think it's something that, musicians, especially solo, full-time, unstarving musicians, take for granted that we're so committed to it. You know what I mean? That, it's like, that's a big part of the story too. So yeah, I've kind of like fell into that. I've been using that practice more and more lately, which has been really, really helpful. So, yeah.
Cool. Speaking of your website, which you mentioned there in passing, do I take it that you're acquainted with Ross over at Electric Kiwi personally?
Yeah, he's great. Oh my gosh, Ross is awesome. Yeah, he really helped me with my website. It's been great working with him.
Yeah. It's a nice site, and I happened to notice that it was designed by Electric Kiwi, and I was like, that sounds really familiar. And so I was thinking maybe that's got to be Ross. I'm just acquainted with him. We've spoken a couple of times, and when I was actually, I think the podcast had started, and I was kind of looking around for podcasts to be interviewed on to talk about my book. And a good friend, D. Grant Smith, connected me with Ross and a couple other people. But anyway, he's a really nice guy, and he's got a neat list of clients too, yourself included.
Oh yeah, no, he's worked with another local guy, Justin Trawick, that I play with, and he's done a great site with them. And he's just got a great vibe and great positive outlook, and he's incredibly skilled at what he does. So I was very, very excited to connect with him. Actually, he's great.
And how did you connect with him?
I saw that he worked on Justin Trawick's website. Okay. So I just go to the musicians that I admire and I see who they're working with, and I reach out to them. Also he has worked with Carrie Cole, who is a singing coach in New York. And he's also worked with Ariel Hyatt and Cyber PR that I have connected with. She's great. I work with them. Been working with them for the last 6 months, actually, Cyber PR. So yeah, he just seemed like kind of like, a good guy in the family, and that community is really important, as you know, and creating that community and connecting to that, because there's so many, like knowledgeable people that have resources already, for folks like me, that just finding the right people really, really kind of like was a big jump start. So Ross was one of them.
Yeah, cool. And I'm sorry, you mentioned, I was looking up a name that caught my attention when I first looked at Ross's client list, because of the name, it eluded me, but it was the band. I remember there's a band called Hunters and Collectors from long ago, but they're, I guess one of the founding members and the lead singer, Mark Seymour, is a one-time client as well. So when I met Ross, I was like, oh wow, you did a site for Mark Seymour. That's cool. You mentioned another service provider, I guess, that you're working with, and I didn't catch the name. Cyber something?
Cyber PR, yeah. Ariel Hyatt. She works out of New York.
Okay.
She's been really good at actually a lot of things. One is just like, connecting me to people in the industry. Another is just, making sure my music gets out there, and like, is like is in the right ears, at the right time. And she's helped me get a couple of reviews that way. And she's just really kind of like really shown me each step of the way where I might need something or need somebody to contact. She knows somebody who I can like get in touch with. So, she's been absolutely wonderful. And, it's helped me get like New York press and local press and national press. So that's been a great resource for me as well.
That's cool. And when you talk about contacts that she's been great at, what are some other examples of like things you were trying to figure out in the past contact-wise that she was able to help you with? What types of them?
Yeah. So she's helped me with people who work with Instagram and Instagram ads. So I've got connected with some pages that like repost videos and photos. She's connected me with, playlisters on Spotify, which is kind of like the new aspect of the music game, that's like what I'm kind of into right now, trying to figure out, and learn, like, you have to learn each platform. So like, all right, I started like, let's learn Facebook, then let's learn Twitter, then let's learn, Instagram. It's like, it's hard to learn them all at the same time. So I've been like, kind of like focusing my energies in certain things.
Sure.
So now I'm focusing on Spotify and understanding, the benefits, the pitfalls, what it can do and what it can't do. And she's been really, really helpful in like pointing me to the right people for Spotify as well. So,
yeah, I think it's Roger Blevins from Mingo Fish Trap that maybe mentioned it in passing when I interviewed him, and the placements and playlisting or playlist solicitation. But and then many weeks passed by, and then I noticed the guys that do the DIY musician podcast that CD Baby does. They had a couple of episodes on things that they had learned recently about playlists and how to get on them. So I noticed that you had, I don't know if it was on Facebook or Instagram or probably both, right? But you had a mention there about a playlist that had picked you up, and it's an interesting new trend, isn't it?
It is. I mean, and the funny thing is about it is that like connecting to these playlists is great and it's getting my music out there. But I did a little social experiment on my own where I put up a post in my local community's Facebook page, the DMV musicians Facebook page. Okay. And I put up a post and I was like, hey, y'all, Eli Lev here. I'm creating a Spotify playlist of all of our local bands. Doesn't matter the genre, no curation. If you want your song on it, put a comment below and I'll get you up there. And man, this took off like wildfire.
Yeah,
it was incredible.
Great idea.
It's got 150 followers now, like 150 listeners. Bands would submit a track, they would share it to their people, and all genres, all whatever. And it's like like the names of your local bands from social media, but you never hear their music for some reason. It's not it's like this weird phenomenon. So finally, I was able to connect all the music to the band names and made some great connects. And I've had more listens to my song Making Space off that playlist than any other playlist that I've been included on. You know what I mean?
That is so interesting. So it's not so much the size of the playlist that had become so significant, but the number of plays that you've gotten.
Exactly. And now we're in like a new era of social media where it's not your followers count. It's not your, like how many people like follow or connect to something. It's how many people are engaging. You know what I mean? How many listeners, how many engagements, how many people are commenting, like how many of your fans are actual people? You know what I mean? Like really kind of like connecting to your music and your brand. So, that's the tricky thing about Spotify is because great, people are streaming my music, but who are these people? You know what I mean? Like, where do they live? Like, can I have their email address? And it's like, there are ways to get that, but it's like, it's tricky. You know what I mean? You have to figure it out a little bit. So hopefully they'll change that. Right now, kind of Spotify is a bit of a black hole for data. You know what I mean? They'll tell you like kind of where in the US that people are listening to your music, but you can't really just, pick out tour dates from that. You never really know what's going on. So, it's a new ball game. with Spotify. So just figuring out that playlist was great though. And I highly recommend anybody in their local scene to kind of put one together and bring your community together, because that made it really, you know what I mean? That collaboration was really powerful, I think, for a lot.
What a great idea. And boy, I hope a lot of people listen to this episode, hear that one thing, because a lot of artists are really working to figure that out, or wanting to figure it out, or just getting started in it.
That's the other thing. Like, part of me being like this kind of avowed indie is that, it's not DIY. It's more like doing it with other people. But like anything that I can do something on my own where I don't have to go through like a gatekeeper, you know what I mean? To like get my music out to people is like so much more valuable, you know what I mean? And so much more interesting than, like I am going through all like the necessary steps to like, get your music out there. But like, I feel like with just a little bit of creativity, you know what I mean? Like that, and maybe that can go a little bit further than, spending all this time and like an effort on like trying to get one person to notice your music. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, and it is also inspiring too. So I think it's great.
Yeah, I think, and we're musicians, we're creatives. You know what I mean? Like, why are we giving up our creative abilities to folks if we should? We have the power and the ideas to like do this. So I feel like that might be the next step, is where kind of like creatives kind of take the power back and like do their own kind of like networking and marketing. So hopefully that'll happen. But yeah, that's my hope.
I guess it's one of those one bite at a time things, and I'm sure for a lot of artists, I would imagine that it is, they feel the stresses of limited bandwidth, so they're looking for these solutions where maybe someone else can help. Which, I know there's a fine balance. You've mentioned both. You've mentioned some people that have been very helpful, and then, the social experiment, as you say, that's turned into something good. So I guess point being, be creative and try some things.
Right. No, that's the balance. You know what I mean? You can't do everything, but like, find the right people to help with certain things, and then like getting that little creative spark can really make it happen. Yeah.
So I read something about your what appears to be a 4-album project, and you're 1 album into that, I think, as far as having released, and correct me if I'm wrong on any of it, but the big question I want to ask, and then I'll let you correct me if I was wrong, is what was the inspiration for approaching the project in this manner, and what was the inspiration for doing that?
Yeah, so the first album is out, All Roads East. The second album, Way Out West, will be out in a couple months, actually, which I'm really, really excited about. And then after that will be Deep South. And then the last one in the series is True North. So there are 4, kind of cardinal directions, and each album is one side of a mandala that I made here in the U.S. with a dear friend of mine, Susanna Ferran, who's actually from Andorra. And the idea came from my time out in the Navajo Nation when I was teaching out there. Kind of like the cosmology of like the 4 directions, and the 4 sacred mountains, and like 4 colors. It all, like 4 is like a really big number, obviously, in a lot of like indigenous kind of beliefs. And depending on the tribe, each tribe has maybe like a different color or a different animal or different something about each 4 directions. But really, if you look across, like each one has their own kind of like 4 direction kind of cosmology. So the Navajo Nation cosmology, I was really interested as a teacher, because I thought, I can like kind of like connect things like, in the classroom with this. And so one of the first units I did was a writing unit based on the 4 directions, where east, the cardinal direction for the Navajo Nation is east, because that's where the sun rises. That's where life begins. If you think about it, it makes a lot more sense than north. So east is like, you're starting with a project, and that's like the creative phase. South is like the planning phase. Then west is the actual action and doing. And then north is like reflection and looking back and seeing what works, and then starting the whole process over again. So this was wildly successful with my students, who were like, the writing process can be related to the 4 directions. So just like, like making something that connects to the earth and like the natural kind of like, the natural phenomenon really was like an eye opener for them. So I thought to myself on this first album, I was like, maybe I can like apply that to music. And so I was like, well, okay, well, so the first album is going to be East. So all roads East, because here I am in Silver Spring, Maryland, East Coast, all roads kind of go here because I've come here and, cycled back around. And then, then all the other names for the albums just kind of fell into place, and I'm halfway there working on Deep South right now. So, yeah.
So it sounds like the students and their excitement about the curriculum you had put together maybe fueled the idea or fueled some inspiration that was already brewing in you already. Is that?
Yeah. And it's also kind of like about the connection, like the process, like, you put out one album and it's just out there, like floating around, like not connected to anything really, or I put out one album and I commit to myself again with the intention that I'm going to make, 3 other albums in this series, and it's all going to come together on like one, work and project. And that gives me a place. You know what I mean? It keeps me on track. It lets me know where I am in the process, and, lets my, fans know that there's like a bigger story coming. You know what I mean? It's like, got to collect all 4 kind of thing.
Yeah. And have you made time commitments to yourself, or are they kind of, I'm sure you have some sort of target being like you've made that intention as well, or a target that is like, I'd really like to make this all happen within this time frame.
Sure. Yeah. I kind of have the general idea of like one a year. And each of them have 5 songs. So, the first one came out last November. This Way Out West will be coming out this November. And then hopefully, Deep South the November after that. And then, hopefully True North the November after that. But trying to get too hard on myself, but that's like the general idea. You might know with album creations, like nothing is really certain.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and it sounds manageable, but I know I said it that way because I'm thinking of the other things that you're involved in with your careers. We talk about things like Spotify playlisting and dealing with PR, and then YouTube, which you've also committed a significant amount of time to, it appears.
Folk Friday, lots of commitments.
Yeah. So, hey, talk about Folk Friday. How long has it been going on, and how's it working out for you, and maybe a little background on it?
Sure. Yeah. I looked at YouTube actually the other day and realized that my first Folk Friday was about a year ago. So I've been doing them about a year, and maybe like every 2 or 3 weeks, I'll post a Folk Friday where I do an original song or a cover song on YouTube. And that's been a great way actually for me to get used to the camera. That's been really helpful. And also a great way to just connect with fans and, check in every once in a while and build my base on YouTube. So it's been a lot of fun. Actually.
And from the getting used to the camera perspective, do you mean video? Because when I look at stills of you, you look very comfortable.
Yes. Well, thanks. I wasn't always like that. Yeah. I mean, it's like there's a big lens in your face. What are you going to do? Are you going to be cool? Are you going to be, you know what I mean? Are you going to be yourself? What is yourself? You know what I mean? It's like it's a whole thing. So YouTube really helped me with that. It's like, okay, who am I on camera? You know what I mean? Like, what is my personality? And and it's me. It's not like not me, but it's just like a little bit of an augmented me, you could say.
Sure. Well, I can appreciate this a lot because I've been very sort of slowly, getting into YouTube for the podcast and for this other professional community that I provide support to, and have some other things in mind too. But yeah, it dawned on me that, okay, I know this will be iterative. The first ones are going to be kind of crappy, or as a recent guest of my other podcast says, your first one's going to suck. Yeah. But I figured, I was thinking to myself, I guess I'm going to see things kind of like when I listened to the podcast, and particularly since I took a step back and have self-edited a few shows, something I was missing by having such a fantastic editor up until somewhat recently, and I hope that he says he's still open to work with me, even though we've put pause on it, but he really cleaned up all my vocal tics and, the uhs and these hesitations that I do, and so I've gotten to, and I wished that they were there a little more, even though I listened to most of the initial recordings. But then what I get left with is what I go back and listen to at the end, which is the final recording, and I get this false impression of how I sound. So it has been very good for me to listen to what, the way I'm speaking more naturally, where I'm really not cutting too much at all out, unless, like some things I was cutting out last week was I'm tapping on the keyboard the entire time my guest is talking, which you could hear. So I was able to control that, which is good, But I thought the same thing of video. I'm probably going to see things as I progress through it, which I'm sure you have, that, okay, yeah, I know that's me, but that's a part of me that I think maybe doesn't work that well all the time. So I'll try to just tame that and emphasize these other parts or amplify these other parts of me. Is that a little bit of how you felt going through it?
Definitely. I mean, you're taking your consciousness, outside of behind of your eyes and putting them in front of your eyes. You know what I mean? And we don't always get to do that. But YouTube makes that possible, and podcasts make that possible. And you've got a great kind of just general demeanor, you know what I mean, where people can like really connect to on audio. And then, it'll be interesting to see how that works with video, and then that'll even strengthen your audio, after that. It's like it all works together kind of thing.
I'm sure.
And it's all the process too. Like, my first Folk Friday, like, I go back and I watch it, and it's like, wow, I've come a long way. You know what I mean? It's nice. It's nice to see, how things are moving, and you can go back and see those. And, and if you really, really don't like something, you can just take it down. You know what I mean? Honestly, people don't really pay attention to that stuff anyways. So you can, you know what I mean? Like we have complete control over our content really if we want it. So,
until somebody comes and says, "Hey man, what happened to that one episode or that one video?"
Yeah, and then you send it to them, you know what I mean? And they're fine, and, it's all good. But, sometimes like, I think to myself, it's like, oh, every post is important. Everybody's going to see this. And it's like, people don't really care that much. It's just, we do. It's the sense, that our personality is more important than any like, small audio tick or anything. So,
yeah. Well, for anyone, I was wondering when the first time I might have the opportunity to do this, but for anyone who is interested in or kind of getting started on YouTube. So first of all, I think you're doing a really neat thing with the Folk Friday, and I've only checked out some of the videos that you have there. The work is very nice. So first of all, check out Eli Lev's YouTube channel, and then if you are kind of looking for some help, I had the great opportunity of interviewing a guy who was kind of loosely acquainted with, but I've become more acquainted with, named Philip Van Dusen, who is a longtime brand design strategist, and he's, for the past couple of years, has been on a entrepreneurial journey and personal branding journey, but he's grown his business a lot through YouTube. So I recently interviewed him, not on this podcast, but on the that other community I mentioned. So that podcast, I'll put it in the show notes, but it's called the Partner for Leads Biz podcast. But you can also search for Philip Van Dusen on YouTube, and he shares some really cool stuff, not just about branding, although that all applies to music, but also about setting up a good YouTube channel. So I'll put all that in the show notes.
Definitely, please. It's awesome.
Yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, that's good stuff. Oh, I wanted to ask you, just for my own, as I do many questions on the show for my own benefit, but what is your YouTube recording setup these days?
Yeah, so I use just a Zoom Handy. I think it's like a H1 or A3 kind of a Zoom Handy recorder. Mm-hmm. It's in stereo, and I just kind of set it up. And then I'm just using my smartphone, which is, fine enough. I definitely need to upgrade soon, but it works. And so I put the Zoom audio, splice that into the smartphone video in iMovie. Afterwards, add some end screens that I created. Mm-hmm. And got yourself a Folk Friday.
And are you plugging in external mics to your Zoom, or just using the ones that are right there with it?
Yeah, so the Zoom is just handheld. Okay. It's not plugged into anything. It's just got two stereo microphones on it. So you just press record on that. I can record in WAV. And then I just put the audio onto my computer after through a USB. Cool. And then just sync it up to my my smartphone.
That's a cool idea. I happen to have a Zoom H6, I believe it is, which I've used all of one time. I bought it last year when I started the podcast, because I was going to San Jose, California, and I had this producer that I was acquainted with, but he's kind of a big deal in the blues scene, and it was just easier for me to do it live, so I bought this recorder, and it was all kind of stressful because I'd never used the device, but it worked great, and I've been thinking of using it for a couple of other things, and this is yet another, and maybe a nice gap for some things, I want to say fill in a gap for some other things I want to do that I'm gearing up for, literally need to get a couple of pieces of gear for, but that's cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Great. Yeah, no, Zoom does great products, and it's super easy once you get the settings right. So, and you can even put your headphones in there and do a headphone check before you start recording too. So, it's a nifty device.
Yeah, I never even thought to try that. And do you remember what model you have?
Yeah, let me pull it out right now. It's the Zoom H1 handy recorder.
Okay, cool. I'll put both of our models on the show notes for anyone who wants to check them out. So
yeah, it's fantastic. It even has a line-in microphone, so if you want to even add another microphone, you can do it. It's got a USB out, and then it also has a line out, so you put your headphones into the Zoom to make sure that all the audio is correct before you start recording, and you're all set. It's great.
Cool. All right, before I don't want to not ask you about this, but I see you have a Patreon page that you've had going for a little while anyway. I'm not sure how long it's been, but it looks like it's been doing well for you. Can you talk a little bit about the history of your page and what maybe some things you've learned about it, and what good things it is doing?
Sure, be glad to. I started the Patreon page again probably last year in August or September. Mm-hmm. It's been steadily growing since then. I think I'm up to about 90 patrons right now. And when we reach 100 patrons, then I will release my Way Out West album exclusively on Patreon. So it's like a really cool kind of like incentive for folks. It's been really, really amazing for me and my community to connect on there every month. I post a song, exclusive kind of audio. Mm-hmm. For patrons who want to donate $1 a month. It's pretty simple. And then for people who donate $5, I post a exclusive video every month. So like each, you can create your own kind of like tiers on Patreon, which is really nice. And people do it different ways. This is just something that works for me because, it's just kind of like simple for me to, keep in my head, and for my fans' heads, like, okay, every month for $1, you get a song. Easy. Every month, $5, you get a video. Great. And then for folks who, contribute $20 a month, I send T-shirts and albums. And then I have a few angel donors as well, which has been really, really amazing. So honestly, without Patreon, I don't think I would be able to do like the extra creative stuff that I, really can't, because like the whole Go Down music video was funded by Patreon.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, the whole, the Chasing Daylight single, which hopefully you can share on this episode, that was all Patreon as well. And it's one thing if you do a crowdfunding, it's like, okay, great, you made some money, and then, it's over. But like if I'm doing this full time, like I can't do a crowdfunding thing every 6 months. You know what I mean? Like, or every year, or even every 2 years, like it gets kind of old.
It's a lot of energy from what I understand to do it well.
Oh yeah. Tons of energy. So at least with Patreon, it's a slow kind of like steady, long game kind of thing. And I'm totally cool with the organic nature of the growth. It's not easy. It takes a lot of, it does take some effort. And especially like reaching out to people individually. But in the end, it's been really, really, really awesome. And hopefully we'll get to 100 in the next, month or 2 months or so. That'd be great.
Yeah. Oh boy. Having one of those moments, lost my train of thought. Well, let's switch gears. Maybe we'll come back to this.
Have you set up a Patreon page?
No. As I wasn't going to ask, but I will. I assume it would be a good thing, but I was thinking I'd ask you, and this isn't what I forgot, but I was thinking I'd ask you, do you think I should set one up for the podcast?
Yeah. Oh, most definitely. I mean, it's going to start with 2 or 3 people, and then it might get to 5, and it might get to 10, then it might get to 20. And then, like after a certain time, it might have its thing. Or, you try it out and, your fans don't, get into it. And then you're like, thank you for, for like trying. It's definitely worth it to try.
Yeah.
And what I've done is my whole Patreon page, I just borrowed ideas from other people who are really successful on Patreon. So, you can just take a look at my Patreon for ideas. Just, take everything, please. With, the video, you've got your video on the top where it's like your little intro and promo. Then you can create the tiers that you want for your fans. It doesn't have to be that complicated either. It can just be either $1 or $3 or $5. And it can be really beneficial, depending on, your listenership and how much they get into it. But I definitely say go for it. So yeah, any help or any kind of like guidance, just let me know. Glad to.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I know what I remember now what I wanted to ask, but did you have a formal launch for it? Did you put a lot of or much time into a quote unquote launch for the page, or did it just happen very gradually?
So the trick about a Patreon page launch is that before you launch it, you want at least 10 or 20 patrons.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I understand. Yeah, it's kind of like when you launch a podcast, you want a few episodes going out all at once.
Right. I mean, like no one wants to see, hi guys, I just launched my Patreon page. I go to your Patreon page and it's just like zero. You know what I mean? So just like my money's going to go nowhere. You know what I mean? So the social proof mentality, and also like the idea that, you already have a community set up is really important. So what I did is I, hit up friends and family and people who I knew that really wanted to support me first before I went public with it. Got a nice little following, made sure that I got everything in the right place. And then, you make like a big launch on social media with it. And then, it's got to be part of your whole ecosystem, or as a podcast, like when you do a Twitter post or an Instagram post, always putting it there can help as well. But that's a little bit of a trick, is to already have a following before you go live with it.
It makes perfect sense. And this coming again from the whole starting a podcast, the service providers, the ones where you can grab your favorite podcasts from, as well as people who are looking for podcasts, love to see a few episodes.
Right.
The first time they go there. So yeah,
right.
I totally get it. And it just applies to a lot of different types of marketing activity. Okay. Something else I want to ask you about, but you did this 3,000 kilometer bike trip, which you alluded to in Spain, starting from Andorra and then ending up in Cadiz. Did I say that right?
In Cadiz. Yeah, in Cadiz, Spain. Yeah.
So I don't know a lot of people personally that have done these types of trips. I've met maybe one or two who I don't know and don't even know where to, just people I happen to meet and talk to once. But I would love to hear what inspired you to do that trip. Did it feed into where you are today? And have you always been a big bike rider, or was this kind of a new adventure? Yeah, so this is the longest bike ride trip I've ever been on. I've been on 2 or 3 week trips in Arizona, up by Arches and Zion and Bryce National Canyon National Park. So that's where my song "Long Way Back to Shanto" kind of was based on. So I've done trips like that, and I've done hiking trips and such, and even like traveling. For 2 or 3 months is kind of like a trip as well, kind of like that. But, just being a little bit, just kind of, how does a thought come into your head where it's like, I'm going to bike from Andorra to Cadiz? Like, how does one come across that thought? That's a very good question. I don't really know. I feel like I kind of had the space in my life to do something. And I always like doing things like kind of on my own terms. So I didn't necessarily want to do the Camino de Santiago, even though I know it's like amazing and it's cool. And like, you meet a lot of people. Like, I kind of like to make my own path. So I was like, I'm just going to see what happens if I put this trip together and do it. And so I literally went on like kind of like an eBay kind of thing in Europe, and bought like a bike for €200,
got all the things for like 300 euros in in a decathlon store, and took off for 2.5 months down the east coast of Spain through Cabo de Gato, and then through Andalusia in the south of Spain, Granada, Cordoba, Sevilla, then to Cadiz. It was pretty amazing.
How much does you mentioned a couple of examples, probably at least one here just a moment ago, but how much do you feel that travel compared to maybe things that are, if you can separate them from travel in your life, how much would you say that factors into your songwriting?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely where I get pretty much most of my inspiration from. A lot of my songs were written on the road, and even, like the living in different places obviously has a lot of impact on that. Just anytime that I can like move the energy, you know what I mean? Like change the perspective or like look at things from a different angle, that always brings in an opening, you know what I mean? For new songs and new melodies and new ideas. So, yeah, a lot of my songs came to me in my head when I was, zoning out on a bike or, in a plane or on a train. That's definitely part of the process for me, I think, for sure.
Do you co-write with anyone, or have you in the past?
I do. I love co-writing. It's really, really fun and really kind of stretches and like tests you. The Chasing Daylight song, my latest single, I co-wrote with Austin Bello here in Virginia. He's a great local producer and songwriter, and he's been in a band as well, so he's got a lot of expertise on that. And I just did another co-write a couple days ago with Jay Stolar, and he wrote with Aloe Black, which is pretty much amazing. His song Aloe Black, Brooklyn in the Summer, he wrote that for him. That's his latest hit. So I just co-wrote a song with him 2 days ago, and it's really, really cool. It's called Wherever We Can Go, and that'll probably be on Deep South. So yeah, I love co-writing. It's really, really a creative kind of like treat for me.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then your band, did those guys write, and whether on their own, or have you ever written with either the guys in the Fortunes Found?
Mm-hmm. So the Fortunes Found are really just kind of like helping me with the live shows at the moment. They've all got their other projects as well. They're like incredible musicians. But the funny thing is that I wrote and recorded all the songs on All Roads East and Way Out West before I had formed that band. So I sent them the recordings and like, this is the songs that we're going to be playing. So, I was very fortunate to have found them at the right time, but I actually recorded all the songs before I met them, so they didn't have a chance.
So so is it a 3-piece?
Right now it's like a 5-6 piece. Keeps getting bigger, which is cool. It's Michael Moralia on drums, Bojan Noveski on bass. We have Jack Dunlap on mandolin, which is nice. Myself on acoustic guitar, and we also have included a singer, Megan Lee, and she's a really great background singer. So she's been joining us on some shows, and we've got an incredible lead guitarist, Dante Friziello. He's like this like prog rock guitarist, so it adds like this whole kind of like mandolin guitar, big folk sound to it. It's really, really amazing what we can do on stage now. So
that's cool. So are you, did I understand right then that you recorded the album and then you found the first parts of the band, a couple of guys or whatever, and then they brought the live aspect to life at your shows, helped you do that?
Exactly. Yeah. So hopefully, on Way Out West and True North, we can get some studio time with them. That'd be great. They've got some amazing things to contribute. But yeah, like even the songs on stage now sound a lot fuller and richer and like take on a personality of their own. So it's really cool to see their development through that. Yeah,
I heard, I don't remember which song, but I heard a recording, and maybe it was in one of the videos of the band, and they definitely sound top notch. And I also heard Megan Lee in one of your videos. I'm not sure if the guitar player there with you, it's a cover that you guys were doing in Fleetwood Mac Dreams.
Yes, yeah. Alex Barnett was the guitar player for that. He's an incredible classical guitarist. And we kind of came together, and Megan Lee has got this amazing barn out there in Keysville, Maryland, and we made this cover recording of Dreams and actually made it to Stevie Nicks' ears. Actually, her niece gave us a shout out on nice. Social media. She's like, Stevie's gonna hear this, so I'm sending it to Stevie. So that was very cool, and we had a great time with that. And that's just, another kind of plus with YouTube. We're just collaborating with amazing musicians and singers and making something fantastic. So that was a great project.
Cool. Yeah, that's a fun story too. That Stevie's niece reached out to you. Very cool.
Yeah.
Very
so
cool
I got some great elements around me, and that's why they're called The Fortunes Found. Just because I feel very fortunate to find these amazing people to connect with. So,
All right. So it looks like everyone can find you and what you're doing and where you are at Eli-Lev, eli-lev.com.
Yeah.
And you have wisely got everything funneled into there. So if they find that website, they can find you everywhere, which is great.
Yeah.
Man, this went by really fast, Eli.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you spending time with me. I look forward to chatting with you offline leading up to this show being in the ears of the loyal listeners as they are. And well, I'm looking forward to listening to more of your stuff. Really, today, as I was getting ready, I started listening again. I previewed it before, but I was really impressed. You're doing great work, and you're an inspiration. You sound like you got it going on, so I know you're going to do great.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it. And you've got a loyal fan over here. The first time you set up that Patreon page, I'll be the first supporter. So just let me know when that happens.
Thank you, man. That means a lot. All of it. All right, man. We'll talk soon.
All right, bud. Thanks again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's something about the weather when we're out on our own. Something about the path that leads us forever home. We don't need a reason, just changing with the seasons, following the feeling in our souls. Now that you're with me, we're chasing daylight. Soulfully alive. Well, I can't believe the world's still turning, 'cause we're hopelessly alive. You mean the sunrise? We're still miles away from the end of the day, and the wind walks by our side. We'll fly through the rivers and we'll swim through the sky. Nothing can bring us down when it's you and I. Now that you're with me, we're chasing daylight and we're soulfully alive. And I can't believe the world's still turning and we're hopelessly alive. You, me, and the sunrise. You, me, and the sunrise. And oh, this golden road leads us on forever home. Now that you're with me, we're chasing daylight and we're soulfully alive. Into the sunrise, letting it all go. 'Cause when you're with me, we're chasing daylight, we're soulfully alive. Oh, I can't believe the world's still turning and we're hopelessly alive. You mean the sunrise. You mean the sunrise.
Hey, thanks again for listening. This episode was powered by the Unstarving Musician's Guide to Getting Paid Gigs, how to get booked and paid what you're worth over and over again. Available in paperback and for Kindle on Amazon. The ebook is now available on Apple Books, Kobo.com, and just about anywhere else that you might find ebooks. It's also available as a standalone podcast called the Unstarving Musician's Guide podcast. You can learn more about the book and companion podcast at unstarvingmusician.com/book. I'd love it if you picked up a copy, and I'd love it even more if you left a review on Amazon. With much gratitude, peace, love, and more cowbell.